Hi there. Well, I thought I would do another review today, another film review. This time for a film which has long been one of my favourites of the horror genre, a film called Session 9 by Brad Anderson. Made before Anderson became more known as a TV director for shows like The Shield, The Wire, and Boardwalk Empire. Session 9 takes place at one of the most gothic and scary looking buildings in the world, Danvers State Mental Hospital in Massachusetts in the USA. And it follows an asbestos abatement team. They basically go into old buildings and clear them of asbestos. Quickly we discover, though, that clearing an old building of asbestos, especially one as large and imposing as Danvers State, is an unpleasant and daunting job, one which few want to do and which few still survive unscathed. One of the descriptions of how asbestos can kill a person given in the film is particularly memorable. And it's into this world, then, that we are immediately plunged at the beginning of the piece. Basically, a group of working-class guys dreaming middle-class dreams and hoping to finish dangerous work in an unrealistic amount of time to collect a bonus. The few characters that are in the film are drawn rather simply but very realistically. We have the grizzled, no-nonsense boss, Gordon, played by Peter Mullen, who is a Scottish actor known for films like Trainspotting, as well as the Red Riding TV series set in Yorkshire in the north of England. His second in command is a character called Phil, played by David Caruso, who is probably most famous for playing Horatio Kane in CSI Miami, at least in recent years. We also have Stephen Jevedon, who is also the writer of the film, who plays Mike, an ex-law student who doesn't want to be where he is in his life, but is stuck shucking fibre, as Phil puts it. And finally we have the arsehole of the piece, Hank, played by Josh Lucas, and the newbie, a character called Jeff, played by Brendan Sexton III, who just happens to be Gordon's nephew. In supporting roles, we have Paul Guilfoyle, who plays Captain Brass in the original CSI series. He plays a character called Griggs in this, who is a local civil servant of a sort, who gives the team their job. And an actor called Larry Feston, who plays McManus, who is a worker from a rival firm, who is called in after one of the guys ends up disappearing, but a little bit more on that later. So, the story starts off simply. Gordon's team wins the contract to clear Danvers State of asbestos, but there's a catch. If the team want to get a $10,000 bonus, they have to be finished and out of there within a week. As impossible as that may seem, given the scale of the place and the job the team have to do. Right from the start, things aren't what they seem, really, and one of the team starts hearing voices and ends up committing a violent act, the true scope and nature of which we don't really discover until the end of the film. Then we get some of the history of Danvers, which is told through conversations had by the characters. Some of these stories have a bit of a ring of truth to them. Some seem apocryphal. But either way, the work progresses quite slowly to the point where the original narrative becomes abandoned, essentially, or it seems to be abandoned, in favour of atmosphere building for the most part. It's still there. They're still doing their job and clearing the asbestos and blah blah. But the atmosphere of the piece is what is the star, if you like. That's the main focus of the film. And the story essentially serves mostly to get this group of people into this location, which is a reasonably common trope in this type of film. Fairly early on, we are introduced to a series of audio tapes, which are found in a box by Mike in the basement of the hospital. And it is these, ultimately, that form the real meat of the film. Seemingly focused on conversations between a patient, Mary, and her doctor, the tapes document the slow degeneration of her mind and an exploration of her condition, which is multiple personality disorder. Each of the 4 personalities, including Mary herself, who may or may not be the dominant personality in this particular system, as they call it in psychology, has a particular role in the woman's mind. One of them is a protective influence, while another is essentially Mary as a child. And the tapes paint this picture of a woman who is completely distraught over her apparent abandonment by her family and her probable commission of an unspeakable crime. Over the course of the film, of course, we discover the dark truth, and by the final session, session 9, we realize the core of Mary's insanity may not be of this world. Meanwhile, as all this is going on, Gordon is starting to feel the stress of both the job and of being a new father, and he reveals some information to Phil which could potentially destabilize the group dynamic. Conversations start being had about him and his ability to lead, mainly by Phil and Mike, and tensions begin to increase. Hank, who is looking for any way out of the life he's in that he can find, tries to essentially rip the place off and ends up disappearing, which adds further to the mounting anxieties among the group, a situation that boils over when we find out what has happened to him, which then builds to a crescendo which will see many of the characters losing their lives before the film is over. While this is the basic story of the film, the dark beauty of the piece, as I said earlier, is the atmosphere. It's created mainly through sound and slow lingering camera work. The constant feeling here is one of absolute dread. And while this mimics the plight of Gordon's team, their sometimes toxic interpersonal relationships, their desperation at the impossibility of their task that they've taken on, it more than anything else reflects the suffering of Mary and patients that have been housed at the hospital over the years, who are ultimately at the mercy of their own fractured psyche. As truths are revealed and the film ends, we are left with a feeling of inevitability at the end of the day, and the feeling that it was always going to end this way because of the nature of the only character left standing at the end of the film, and also the nature of the forces that neither they, nor Mary, nor even her doctors could ever really hope to control. Whether the final personality that is released through the tapes is supernatural or not is in some ways immaterial. It's as much about the building and the madness that has been housed there throughout history, taking on the aspects of almost like a disease or a contagion which preys on people who are susceptible to its malign influence, basically. So if you're susceptible to evil influence, basically. This building, this entity, whatever it is essentially going to at least try to take you over. It's a small, rather quiet film with a budget of around $1.5 million, and it's easily one of the most memorable, unsettling, and poignant pieces that I've seen, particularly from the early 2000s. While Anderson himself would go on to be known more for The Machinist with Christian Bale, as well as for various TV work, for me it's Session 9 that stands as his most memorable and important showing, really. And it's a film that stays with the viewer, in the mind of the viewer, long after the credits roll. Anyway, so that was my review of Session 9, and if you like horror movies, gothic horror, psychological horror, that kind of stuff, you will probably enjoy this. As I say, it's quite small and quite quiet, but in my view very effective. So, as always, and with all of the above being said, please like, share, comment and subscribe and all that other good stuff. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.